Music Breakdown here, and to celebrate the release of their next album, Revolution Radio, this Friday, I decided I'm going to do a Green Day artist retrospective. I'm a little late. I was actually planning to do this a while ago, and I didn't, but I'm doing it now. Green Day is one of my favorite bands. Probably top 10, probably not top 5, probably top 10. And there's a lot of differing opinions on this band. I think the general consensus is that their old stuff is good and they fell off either before American Idiot or after American Idiot. You're not gonna find too many people who love the entirety of the band's discography, and you're probably not gonna find too many people that absolutely just despise the band outright either. So I figured I'd give my opinions on them, and I hope that Revolution Radio is a good album, although given the 3 singles, it's not looking to be, but we'll see. I'll do a review of it when it comes out. So let's start with the band's debut release, 39 Smooth. So 39 Smooth is a band in its infancy. You can tell. These recordings are almost demo quality. They don't sound too great. Their drummer John, not as good as Trey Cool. He's not bad, but he's not as good as Trey Cool, who would come in on the next album. But at this time, Green Day was obviously an underground band, and they already were starting to reach some success in the underground with this album, and then the next one would catapult them a little bit farther. You know, I like this album. I think it's good. A lot of people kind of overlook it. No, I think a lot of people totally overlook it. But it is a good album. It's got good stuff on here. Going to Pasalaqua is a fantastic song. At least you gotta hear that one. But there's some other good stuff on here. I actually think most of this material is solid. Of course, it could be better with better production. Guitar tone isn't too great, but it does sound pretty punk, which is cool. And it's probably more towards punk than pop punk on this album, which you can really tell on most of these songs. I think the next album moves them into that pop punk direction. I would say don't start here. I mean, definitely don't start here. Chances are you've already heard Dookie, or at least stuff off of Dookie, but that should be your starting place. Still, 39 Smooth is good, and definitely I would recommend it for fans of the band who haven't checked out the really early stuff. This would probably be the album you haven't heard. It does even show some foreshadows of later stuff, like the track 16 sounds almost identical to Walking Contradiction. Basically, what I'm saying is Walking Contradiction is like an improvement on 16, essentially. So it's an interesting album to hear for sure, and a good one at that.
What the heck? What is that for heaven? You and I together, and in here we run away. I'll be for nasty weather, but I'll take wheels up for you thought his word, and now he's getting lazy. There's no motivation and frustration makes you crazy.
With Kerplunk, I'd say this is where the band really got started. 39 Smooth was a solid debut, but Kerplunk is really the beginnings of Green Day's greatness. And it's also the beginning of their pop-punk sound, which I think this band really helped to define. And sadly, that label has not been applied to very many good bands since. But Green Day owns it, and I think they own it well. The album starts off with 2,000 Light Years Away, which immediately tells you, man, Kerplunk's gonna be better than 39 Smooth, isn't it? Because this is a fucking fantastic song, and so is the next track, One for the Razorbacks. Billy Joe was coming to his own. He was writing great melodies. He was singing really well compared to 39 Smooth. He just started to come into his own. He started to sound like, man, this guy's gonna be a great frontman in the future. It was a great frontman around the time of this album, too. Also, they were starting to write really great vocal harmonies on this album, which you didn't really hear a lot of on 39 Smooth. Christy Road usually gets talked about off this album too, because it's a really neat song. It starts slowly, but then it kicks into this second section where it gets really punk. And it's a cool dynamic shift. Probably the first song they've made that really goes in any interesting direction. They didn't do a lot of that in their early period. Frankly, they didn't do a lot of that until maybe Nimrod, but still, it's cool to hear this early on. This was also the first album featuring Trey Cool's drumming, and he is a great drummer. He was great from the start with this album. His fast drum fills, his ability to keep up an incredibly high pace, well, like most punk drummers can, but I think Trey does it with a certain amount of style that a lot of punk drummers don't. My favorite track off this album is Who Wrote Holden Caulfield, which I think is a cool way to kind of tie Billy Joe's feelings in with that of Holden Caulfield, just being a careless kid. And he doesn't really feel much. And that's kind of a theme of a lot of songs from the early stuff. He's just a confused kid. My only real issues with this album are that Dominated Love Slave is just stupid to me and I don't really find it funny, and Words I Might Have Ate is not a very great closer. But other than that, this is a really, really great record, and if you haven't heard it and you're a Green Day fan, which is possible, please do. Check out their earliest stuff before Dookie. Dookie is not their first album.
'Cause I'm losing once I've got my dignity. The small price I'll pay to see that you're happy. Forget all the disappointments you have faced. You'll bed up your worry well. Welcome to paradise.
Well, Dookie isn't their first album, but it is their best album. This album skyrocketed the band to insane amounts of mainstream success. This album has gone diamond. I mean, it's a huge, huge album, and its songs were and still are everywhere. I mean, you can't tell me you haven't heard Basket Case or When I Come Around. And also Welcome to Paradise, Longview, and She are mainstream radio staples. So while that might wear these songs out, I don't listen to the fucking radio, because fuck the radio, so it doesn't matter to me. This is one of those albums I picked up at an early time in my album listening experience. Fuck, that's pretentious. But anyway, this album is one of those albums that got me into albums. And I think it's that way for a lot of people. It's a huge 90s alternative rock classic, and it's a huge hit. And you've heard some of these songs. Hear the album. It is phenomenal. Pop punk as a whole is usually considered a terrible genre, and I understand that because most pop punk acts are fucking terrible. The only one I can really think I like, through and through, is Green Day, and Dookie is the best pop punk album of all time. There is no doubt in my mind about that. Every single one of these tracks is fantastic. The feeling that this album gives you is true euphoria. I really feel that the sound of Dookie was never captured as well by any band, not even Green Day. And it perfectly encapsulates the teenagehood of a lot of people. Billy Joe just had a knack for understanding teenagers. He basically was one. I mean, he was in his 20s, but fuck it, you know, he'd been through that recently. Opening the album with Burnout is awesome. Burnout basically represents what this album is about, but I mean, the album's a ton of fun and its hits are fantastic. Longview, fan-fucking-tastic. And of course, Welcome to Paradise, which is actually a redone version of the same song on Kerplunk. It's much better here, much better produced. This whole album, just like production, just skyrockets after Kerplunk and onto this album. It's produced so much better, and it's not like it's super clean. It's not even produced that poppy. It's still got a distinct rawness to it that Kerplunk had. It just sounds much less messy. I love the way the album is structured. I love the way the album feels. I just connect a certain sound with this album that it encapsulates perfectly. It's bliss, but it's also confusion. It's a whole number of things. It's also angst, but not angst in the like, oh, I'm mad kind of way. Just angst in the way where you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. You know, I'm a teenager, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And that's what Dookie is. I do also want to comment that I think the ending to this album is great. I love how they put all the 1-minute songs leading up to FOD. I think it's a really cool way to kind of like, it's like this rapid fire finish and then you hit FOD, which is phenomenal. And I wish this song were talked about more because I think it's fantastic. I love that it's like the half of this song's the quietest thing on the album. You almost have to turn up the album to hear it sometimes. And it's quiet and it's really nice, it's really subdued, but then when it just kicks in, it just gets loud and angry and it's like, holy shit, this is what it's been building up to, isn't it? I love Dookie. It's phenomenal, it's their best album, it's the best pop punk album of all time probably, and you just gotta hear it, although chances are you already have. So we go from that album, which is just a radio staple and it is just a classic, to Insomniac, which kind of got overlooked at the time and still sometimes does. And when I say overlooked, I mean overlooked by the radio. None of these songs are really staples except maybe Brain Stew, although Walking Contradiction and Geek Stink Breath do get play. just not nearly to the extent of Dookie. And you can kind of see why. This album isn't as blissful as Dookie, I mean, not even close. It has a similar sound, but a very different tone, if that makes any sense. I mean, the album is, it sounds darker than Dookie, especially like Geek Stink Breath and Brain Stew, both of them. They sound heavier, they sound darker, and they're fucking awesome. It is a great step forward from Dookie. There are moments on this thing I actually like more than Dookie, it's just the album as a whole isn't quite as solid. But like, Armitage Shanks, fucking awesome opener. Panic Song is incredible. It is so awesome. I wish people talked about this song more. I love that build in the first like minute and a half of this song, where it's just, you know, Mike Dirnt's bass, and he's just like strumming that thing as fast as he possibly can, and the song's just building up, and it gets loud as hell, and then it busts into the actual song, which is really short, but really great. It's just so effective. And it is like the audio representation of a panic attack in some ways. I really like it. I mean, look, the album's great. It doesn't have as much radio power, but I wouldn't say it's like, you know, inaccessible or anything. It is similar to Dookie. I don't think it's totally different. But I mean, look, it doesn't reach Dookie's levels of awesome, but it's close, and this album is fantastic as well.
There's no return from 86. There's no return from 86. There's no return from 86.
So Nimrod plants the seeds of modern day Green Day. That could be looked at as a bad thing. It could also be looked at as a good thing. I think it's sort of a combination of both, but I mean, well, not really bad. This is not a bad album. This is a great album, just not as good as Dookie or Insomniac or Kerplunk, but it takes the band in a new direction, and that's a good thing, right? That you can't look at that as a bad thing. They're not just doing the same thing over and over again. And it's definitely more radio friendly than Insomniac. Good Riddance, Time of Your Life is a song that needs to stop getting fucking played because most people hate this song. I love it, but once again, I don't listen to the fucking radio because fuck the radio. The album's got 18 tracks. It is a monster compared to the previous works. I mean, it's not a super long album, but it's long for a Green Day album up to this point. And they try a lot of different sounds, sometimes even ska punk with the song King for a Day, which I love that song. They're exploring a lot of different song topics, once again going back to King for a Day. That's about a transvestite. I think that's kind of neat. They even have a hardcore punk song on here, Take Back, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, Nimrod's going more pop at this point. They're going more in the pop direction, and that's not a bad thing because Green Day's great at writing pop songs, at least they were at this time. And there aren't really any blunders on this album. I think, at worst, these tracks are good tracks. You know, maybe the only flaw is that it does feel a little, you know, packed, because it is a little packed. It's not really that much of a problem. The album's not too long or anything. I guess my main complaint is that Prosthetic Head is a great song, but not a great closer, and Good Riddance would have been better. I'm guessing they didn't do that because it felt too cliche to end on a song like that, but I still think it should have ended on Good Riddance. I mean, whatever. Great album. I love this album. Great. Love it. Thumbs up. Recommend. Woohoo.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why.
On Warning, the band showed what I think is a natural progression from Nimrod, but also not the progression that audiences probably wanted. And I get it. I mean, I get it. You want to hear more of that Dookie Green Day, and Nimrod even provides you with that, to a certain extent, but Warning really doesn't. So, you know, fine. I could understand why somebody would be like, oh, what the fuck, Green Day? What are you fucking doing on this album? But I mean, it's a really solid album. Not as good as their last few. It's definitely a dip in quality from Nimrod, but I mean, I like it a lot. The title track Warning, the track Waiting, and the track Minority are probably the most well-known. Well, I'd just say Minority and Warning, actually, but Waiting I mentioned because I love that song and it's great. And I think it was a single. Could be wrong about that. I hope I'm not being an idiot. Anyway, it's kind of like a folk punk album. Cool direction, and they pull off the sound pretty well for the most part. Some of these songs I think are kind of throwaways. It gets to the point sometimes where it sounds a little too poppy to be as mature as I think it could have been, and I think this sound kind of gives way to. Blood, Sex, and Booze is the best song on the album. I wish more people knew this song, because this song is great. It's about BDSM of all things. Love that song. But of course, the title track is great too. That's a fun song. I really like how they were starting to get a little political, but not to the extent they would get later, although granted, I think Green Day gets more credit for being political than they deserve, because they're not that political in their music. They even do a story song on here called Misery, which I don't think goes over too well, but it's kind of neat to hear them do it anyway. And Macy's Day Parade is a fantastic closer. It's a great song. It's a really nice, soft song, almost a ballad, and it's a thing the band hasn't really shown they could do until this album. But it's not really an album I return to very much. It's not really the album's fault. It's just a lot of the songs here I don't really feel like returning to very often, especially when compared to other Green Day albums. And really, it is a weird release. It's a very middle release, because everyone remembers Nimrod, everyone remembers American Idiot, and Warning's just kind of there. It just kind of happened. But you shouldn't overlook it. I would suggest you hear it. It is a good album.
If I promise go to church on Sunday, will you go with me on Friday night? If you live with me, I'll die for you and this compromise.
So after Warning, the band didn't know what the fuck to do. They didn't have as much commercial success as they had previously had, nor critical success. Warning just didn't do very well. But after their album they were working on, Cigarettes and Valentines, got stolen, after all those tapes got stolen, they worked on something new, and this is what came of it. American Idiot is a divisive album. Warning might have made some early Green Day fans be like, oh, this fucking sucks, but it wasn't gonna turn them off and say, I'm not listening to this band anymore. If that album didn't do it, this album did. Because this album is mainstream pop punk. There's no question. And I'm not saying that as an insult, I'm just saying that because that's what it sounds like. I mean, the actual song American Idiot. You know, Wake Me Up When September Ends. These are very, very radio-friendly songs, and I think the fan base would have gotten split naturally from this album. But I'm wearing this shirt, so you already know what I think of it. I think the album is fantastic. It's one of the best rock operas ever made. You know, not much competition there, but still. Because it's very concise, it's not bloated like Tommy is or something. Yes, I did just say American Idiot is better than Tommy, bite me. Because the album's not trying to force this story on you. They can tell the story well in a series of good songs, of songs that stand on their own. And I think, as far as pop punk albums go, this is the most theatrical it had been to this point. And in a very good way. Jesus of Suburbia is their best song. It is. This song is amazing. It is so great. They managed to sneak 5 songs into one in an incredibly cohesive way that makes perfect sense, both within the story, the context of the album, and the context of the song itself. It doesn't feel jumbled. It is a great, great song. And for Green Day to do a 9-minute song, well, it's just not something I think people would have expected. But I love the story here of the Jesus of Suburbia. He's just burnt out from Bush-era US. He's fucking burnt. He's like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. So he goes off on his own. He tries to be somebody else, but he realizes that in the long run, there ain't nothing there for him. And it's better to just go through what's going on now than to try to be someone you're not, than to try to do things that you just can't do. And he realizes the problems of a fake lifestyle. It is political, but only subtly so. I think the most political track here is Holiday and the title track. For the most part, it's just a story about somebody living in this era who doesn't know what to do with themselves. They don't feel like there's a place for them. But I really like how it just, in the end, it's like, you know, the place for you, you're gonna find it, and if you force it, it's just not gonna happen. You're gonna get into a lot more shit. The singles off this album were destined to be radio hits, for better and for kind of worse. Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams are fantastic. They are great. Boulevard of Broken Dreams, overplayed. Once again, fuck the radio, I don't care, but I can understand why someone would be like, God, I don't ever want to hear that song again. I get it. But it's their best ballad. If Good Riddance and Macy's Day Parade were Green Day showing that they could do ballads, this is them showing, yeah, fuck yeah, we can do ballads. And we can make them huge hits. which they already did in Good Riddance, so I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but anyway. However, American Idiot and Wake Me Up When September Ends are my least favorite songs on this album. They're good songs, but they already feel overplayed from like the first time you've heard them. And the album is produced very heavily. It's almost overproduced. It doesn't quite get there, but it comes a little too close for my taste sometimes. But what I do love is I love how the songs come in pairs. I love how you've got Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams paired. You've got Are We the Waiting and St. Jimmy paired. Give Me Novocaine, She's a Rebel. You know, the songs flow into each other, but in pairs. That way it's not like you just keep listening to the same fucking thing and you're like, there's no breaks. There's a break after each 2 songs. So every song kind of is set up in a way that they complement each other. Or like how Are We the Waiting is this slow, pretty song that kind of drags on, and then you hit St. Jimmy, which is this really theatrical pop-punk song, picks up the pace, and it's really cool. I really like how they juxtapose these songs together. Also, Give Me Novocaine and She's a Rebel does kind of a similar thing there. There's no monotony on this album. They tried a lot of things. The band was experimenting with what kind of styles they could get away with doing, and they can get away with doing a lot of different styles, as this album proves. What's also really clever is how Jesus of Suburbia and Homecoming, the 2 9-minute suites in the album, bookend the album. Homecoming is almost just as good as Jesus of Suburbia. It's also incredible how they made this work. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how this band could have ever done this, but they did. And it's awesome. They obviously had a lot of influence from The Who, now that I brought up Tommy, there's no question. Like on East 12th Street in Homecoming, it sounds like a Who song. And that can only really be a compliment. And by What's Her Name, the album wraps its story up really nicely. Jesus is just kind of saying like, well, I met a bunch of people, I don't remember any of them. You know? Fuck them. I've moved on, it happened, and it's erased from my memory because none of it was real. I just think it's such a cool story that gets called a political statement, and I really don't think it is. And I don't think that does it justice either, because I think it's better than that. And rock operas tend to be pretty shitty on the story side, but not this one. It's cohesive, coherent, all that kind of shit, you know, the words I use all the fucking time. Most importantly, it's a great album.
Not to live, to die in tragedy, to run away. Born into Nixon, now he's raised in hell. Oh, I bet your rabbit teams as well.
Now, I already reviewed this album, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I like it less than I did then, but not by very much. I still think this is an underrated album. A lot of people really hate this one. If American Idiot was a split in the fan base, this just split it further. And I can see why. I mean, American Idiot was radio friendly, but it held its own. Some of the songs here are just so radio friendly it's annoying. Like 21 Guns, what a boring song that is. Last of the American Girls, same deal. You know, Know Your Enemy, ugh. So I get it. This album's bloated yet again because how many tracks? 18, I think, again. It's got 18 tracks, it's over an hour long, it's longer than American Idiot was. And also the story isn't nearly as coherent because the theme is basically that, you know, nothing makes sense. And in turn, the album makes very little sense and the story makes very little sense. It's still cool though, it's got cool thematic elements. And I still like a lot of these songs. So my opinion hasn't really changed very much. I would suggest you watch that review, but to sum it up, it's got a lot of great songs, it's got a few blunders here and there as well, but overall, it's solid. Not as good as American Idiot, which it was desperately trying to be, but you know, I can still give it props. It tried a lot of things, and it succeeded in a lot of places.
Somebody take the pain away. It's like an ulcer bleeding in my brain. So send me to the pharma. Someone kill the DJ. The fucking DJ. Someone kill the DJ.
How the mighty can fall. How the mighty can fall so hard. Fucking Uno. Uno. Uno is the start of the trilogy that Green Day released in 2012. You could almost consider this to be a triple album, and this is disc 1. 3 albums worth of songs in 1 year. after 21st Century Breakdown, which was already a little bit downhill. You know, coming to this, what could you expect but a really bad album? Because this is a really bad album. This album lives in a world where the blunders on 21st Century Breakdown were the best songs on 21st Century Breakdown, and it's trying to emulate them. It is bad. It is really, really bad. The production is annoyingly clean. It is absolutely awful. It sounds like a Loudness War product. There is not one good song on Uno. This is supposed to be a back to basics. Are you fucking telling me that Uno is supposed to be like Dookie? Because Uno's not like Dookie, okay? It's not even close. This doesn't even sound like they sound. This is why pop punk is a bad name. This sound, they did the pop punk sound, not the Green Day pop punk sound, the pop punk sound, the scene sound. This is a band appealing to scene kids. And it's appropriate that scene kids tend to like Green Day for these albums. You see them wearing the Uno Dos and Tres shirts. And look, I don't want to knock you if you like these albums, of course, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that Green Day was appealing to an audience that does not appeal to me, and a lot of its fans for that matter. But there's not one good song on this thing. There isn't. They're all lackluster. The best is Oh Love and Rusty James. The last two tracks are the best, and these are just kind of mediocre songs. Not great, but nothing that would make me think, man, this is fucking awful. But a lot of these other songs do, like Kill the DJ. Someone kill the DJ, shoot the fucking DJ, over and over again over this really shitty sounding disco dance beat that they made. The songs sound like they're hardly even songs, like they're shit they wrote in a day, and they didn't really care one way or the other, which seems like a reasonable thing considering that they have, you know, 3 albums worth of songs in 1 year. I mean, the album isn't awful, right? It's not like abysmal. I'm not like, oh god, Uno, bleh, you know? No, I would do that, but it's not awful. It's just, it's Green Day, Uno. Green Day, Uno. This band made Uno. Fuck.
Take me close to you. Far away, ways away.
Dose, another one. Awesome. Well, it tries to be a little different. Goes for a more garage rock sound. The one thing about garage rock, though, that I think is kind of the point, is it's supposed to be minimally produced. You overproduced garage rock. I don't even know how that's possible, but this album's better than Uno. Significantly. Still a bad album, but it's significantly better than Uno. I actually like the song Makeout Party and Stray Heart, especially Stray Heart. Stray Heart's great. And Amy's pretty decent. Ashley's pretty decent. There's some okay songs. There's also,
Oh baby, baby, it's fuck time.
Oh baby, baby, it's fuck time. But not only are there quite a fair share of dumb songs on here, there's also the worst song the band has ever made, and I don't think they're ever going to top it. And it's on Dose. Fucking Nightlife. What were they thinking when they made this horrible song? It's like Green Day trying to do like this smooth, sexy hip-hop song, I think. It sounds like borderline fucking crunkcore in these lyrics. What's that I hear? You want to go for a ride? Don't be afraid, boy, to come inside. Hope there's more in your pants than a bus route. I'm gonna stop because this isn't just a song review of Nightlife, but still, seriously, what the fuck? I mean, look, some people think the trilogy consistently got worse. I personally think it consistently got better, but that's not really saying much. This album still sucks.
Ashley, are you running around? Are you crying out in bloody murder? Ashley, are you bumming around? You're not crying on my cold shoulder. Bombs away, here goes nothing. The shouting's over. It's kid.
Trey! This album's kind of underrated. Because there's a lot of people think it's the worst of the trilogy. I don't fucking know why. It's the best of the trilogy. It's not a good album, I don't want to listen to it ever, but you know, it's better than the other one. It's got actually some good stuff. Brutal Love is actually a great opener. It's produced terribly, and it's just as overproduced as the other two. But the songs here are better, and that's much more important. I think The Forgotten is a really good ending to the trilogy. Just because it's a good song, so that's nice. I mean, it's still got some songs that aren't very good. Sex, Drugs, and Violence sucks. You know, I mean, some of these songs are just kind of like, not great, but nothing here is outright, like, terrible, which is a huge relief from the last two. It's just a really middling release. I mean, it's good that it's better than the other two, but, you know, whatever. It's still not a good album, so I don't really care that much, but I mean, you know, you gotta give them credit for something here, I guess. But I mean, they really did put most of the good songs in the trilogy on this album, which is nice, especially after Uno and Dos, especially Uno. But yeah, I mean, Revolution Radio, please be better than this, please. Your singles not giving me much hope, but just be better than these three, all right? Just come on.
99 revolutions tonight. 99 revolutions tonight. 99 revolutions.
So that's it for Green Day. Yeah, I love this band. Yeah, sure, the trilogy, fuck it. But I mean, before then, I don't have any complaints. And I want this band to be great again, or at least be good, you know? I just want another good album. I will review Revolution Radio, and you can be looking forward to it. I really hope that it's better than the singles have led me to believe, because this is one of my favorite bands, and they will continue to be that. I just hope I don't have to keep writing off their new albums, like Pixies, speaking of which, got a Head Carrier review coming soon. Anyway, bye guys.